Hey, what's up guys and welcome back to Anime King. And today I'm gonna be giving you part 9 of What If Naruto was a direct descendant of the sage. Remember to get this one to 200 likes as usual. Share this to all of your friends in social media platform. And also, remember to stay in tune for Anime King 3. I'm gonna be posting a brand new episode of What If Naruto awakened the Yellow Rinnegan after his exile. And later on, I'm going to post a new episode of What If Naruto was given abilities by 4 devils. So stay tuned for that and I hope you guys do enjoy. Remember, if you're new, to go ahead and click that red subscribe button and become part of the Anime King family. And thank you for all of your help and your support. And yeah, without further ado, what do you say we begin this new episode? Start the intro. So, the last time we left off, as Jiraiya was on the hunt, his toad could not get into the barrier that protected the fire temple, and he didn't have time to go back all the way there. But he was going after the little Minato look-alike, as he had saw the boy with whisker marks. But how could that be Naruto? What was Sensei thinking that allowed Naruto to wander the world like this? Just what was the hell going on? As Naruto was talking to Shizuka, as they had to make their way to Netsuko village to call this whole thing off. Getting there, they met up with Tokiwa, and they made their way towards the head, as it was Shizuka's mother, as they want to call off the marriage, but Shizuka wanted to follow the village rule, so she said nothing was wrong, as she ended up storming out, as she went to talk to the boy that she actually loved, Sajiri. They were attacked by Kumu ninjas who just seemed to have escaped, seeing that they were still in the border. As Naruto came there and dealt with them. As the ruler, she wasn't about to allow anything to happen or make her daughter marry into a loveless marriage. As Shizuka decided that she would not let go of Sajiri despite the loss, as she loved him too much. So with that, as the head gave Naruto a headband, it didn't have any symbol on it, but it had 2 horns on it, as it was the male members of their clan, someone with the highest ranking. As Naruto gladly accepted, and with that they headed off. As they made their way towards the hidden lightning. Making their way there, Naruto ended up summoning a creature, a bird, to fly them there, but he saw the bird already had a black chakra rod in his neck. But he was confused, this thing was real, so how did he have this? This is the first time he was summoning it. It was strange, but he shrugged it off as they made their way. They were escorted in. As Fu and Shizuku made joke of him to not meet the Jinchuriki right away. As Naruto headed off, as he ended up meeting a girl named Yujito, but things didn't escalate too far as Naruto asked for directions and then headed off, as he took a few jobs here and there. Naruto was trained as he was practicing lightning as Amoy, a boy, came there and showed him a few tips. People were more calm when it comes to Monk, as Naruto ended up talking to the Kyuubi once again, allowing Shikaku to chase after Rod. The Kyuubi this time spoke to Naruto normally, as Naruto stepped inside the bars after hearing the Kyuubi story and told him that he's sorry, as he didn't know how far this would go, but he saw what his kind has done to his. The fox knew that he could just crush him right here. It would take some time to reform, but he could just crush him right here, right under his paw. But he did not. As Naruto ended up exiting, the fox told him that this doesn't make them friends. So, that was basically as we left off. You guys can switch across the page and check it out for yourself. So, what do you say we begin this new episode? A week went by for the trio, and it was rather peaceful. Naruto noticed that they were still being watched by the Onvus of the village, but that wasn't bad because they weren't doing anything wrong. But what the Onvus did not know was that they were mostly following transformed shadow clones around all day. It had worked in the sand, so Naruto saw no reason why it wouldn't work here, and he was right. During the day, he would help Shizuku with their elemental training as far as he can, and he would practice on his own lightning exercise while sparring with Fu. In the evenings, he sent out his clones at the various stores to help them with their work to get paid. It wasn't a great amount, but it was at least enough to tide them over on their journeys. Right now they didn't have to buy much, although Naruto felt guilty sometimes for playing on the old monk, hospitality. Currently was sitting on that same plateau that had become sort of a training ground for him since his visit to Kumu. Amoy had come by a few times as well, and the young shinobi always exaggerate things. I even told Naruto about his village a bit, and his teammates. Nothing classified or that could consider dangerous, just banter between them. The two had become quick friends. Naruto missed having a guy friend to talk to, being surrounded by two girls all day. Fu was nearby as she was trying to perfect the Shadow Clone Jutsu, as two frail clones appeared beside her before they poofed away. Naruto had figured out their stamina and her reserves. The Shadow Clone Jutsu would have suited her well. There was also, she was not limited, like Naruto, when he could only just summon 5 because of his vision when he shared with the clones, and it was really giving him a headache, so she could use them for her good practicing. Shadow Clone Jutsu! As there was another large poof, as a shaky Fu appeared next to the original. Naruto smiled at her accomplishment. She finally made one that could stand. She was getting closer. She has been working at it for the last 2 hours. Of course Naruto got it down in only one, but he was challenging Sora to see who could do it first, and he was a winner of that little challenge of theirs. As Naruto continued with his lightning manipulation, the more he went along he felt like each element was becoming easier to master. Perhaps he was just getting better at separating his chakras. After a while, Fu walked over as she sank down to the ground beside him. That is truly an impressive technique. I couldn't even imagine that someone can learn something so fast by using memory feedback. Naruto nodded as another bright arc of electricity jumped between his hands. It was like a laser show. Yeah, but you have to be really careful. Sora got really bad headaches when he let too many clones dispel at once. Sora was on bed rest the other day, but at least he learned something about restraint. Fu nodded in understanding as she fell on her back from the exhaustion. Even as a Jinchuriki, splitting her chakra so much time between clones was tiring. She was sure that she would feel a strain that she put in her pathways tomorrow morning, advanced healing or not. I'm surprised more people don't attempt the training method. The possible gain really outweigh the dangers of the technique. Naruto let his arms drop. Well, maybe for you and me, but from what I've seen, Jinchurikis seem to be a special case. I don't know how to describe it really, but our chakra is more denser than others, so we can split it more safely. Normal people can probably push their limit to probably 20 clones at very most, but it's dangerous beyond that for them. The other fact is about maintaining them for the longest. The longest I've ever maintained a clone for is for 10 hours. Other than that, they seem to become unstable. Add that to their frailty, and they lose their value as training tools. Fu nodded that she understood. I understand. From what you describe, they seem more suitable for reconnaissance. The two were interrupted as they turned to see Shizuku, scaling the mountain down towards them with a rather excited look on her face. She skidded to a stop in front of them, panting slightly, but she was grinning. Naruto, I found him, she said. Naruto raised an eyebrow and confused. As she got her breath, you know you told us about that sage guy, the one who had the Rinnegan before you. Naruto winced at how loudly she said it. Luckily, the envelopes were off, after his clones. You said he had a lot of objects that he put his power into, like your staff. Naruto wanted to correct her, it was a Shakijo and the staff, but he was too interested to hear where this was going. Well, they're here, in Kumu. Naruto blinked in surprise. He got to his feet. How do you know? Naruto asked, as Shizuku went into her pouch and pulled out a pamphlet. They were exhibits from the origin of Kumu, weapons displayed from the war times, and an exhibit on the Sage of Six Path. He looked up to see a grinning Shizuku, almost waiting for a pat on the head for her good work. Wow! Great find, Shizuku, he said, as he grabbed her and spun her in a hug, much to her delight. As he finally set the blushing girl as he looked over the pamphlet, but he didn't have much information, just when the museum opened up. Did you get a look at anything? Naruto asked. Shizuku shook her head, still looked red from the unexpected hug. No, I ran right over here when I found out. Naruto nodded as he continued to scour the pamphlet. Fu walked across as she glanced at the paper over her shoulder, as she then turned towards the Shakijo. Why would Kumo keep something as powerful as the sage's tools in a museum? Why not actually use them? As Naruto looked up with a small grin, shaking his Shakijo slightly. Well, if they're anything like this, hardly anyone to be able to hold them, never mind use them. Really, only a Kage, Jinchuriki, or Rinnegan user would be properly able to use them. Fu nodded as she had once held Naruto's staff out of curiosity, as she was sure, despite her large amount of chakra, she would be drained within an hour. It made her appreciate him even more that he could carry that thing all around all day, with no drain on his chakra pathway. It was truly made for a Rinnegan user, perfect for him. But Kumu has two Jinjukis. As far as the other countries are aware, the Nibe and the Haxabi. Naruto seemed shocked. He couldn't say why they wouldn't utilize such a powerful tools that belong to the sage. Maybe the tools don't fit with their fighting styles. No one really had the answer for him. They knew as much as he knew, not much. Perhaps he could get something under the Kyube, but since your talk he has been being unresponsive lately, he was acting like a petulant child. But still, he knew where to find the answers. Timescape, the Kumu Museum, seemed like a small building from the outside, until you realized it was built inside of a mountain, so the lower levels were large. There was a gift shop nearby selling other little items to promote Kumu, as the place was wonderfully built with marble-like stone that was carved into the mountain. It was there to attract tourists after all. Inside was cool and well ventilated to make up for the cramped spaces with the pack of people that would sometimes make it hot. The sage of the 6th level was on the lowest level of the museum. The trio had a good time looking through the displays as Naruto looked at the Haxabi and displays even about him attacking the village. There was even a small model of Kumo with a Haxabi inside of it destroying it. There it is, as Naruto felt a tug on his sleeve as it was Shizuku, as she was pointing towards where the sage display was. They made their way inside. Things were packed on the walls, or in a pedestal that was covered by glass. As Naruto gravitated over to the large glass window that had the tools behind it. They don't look all that impressive, Fu said, as Naruto found himself agreeing with her. The first was a blade, the label marking it as a Shishi Saibin, a white metal blade that folded around the pole. The information mentioned something about word soul, something like that. It didn't make a lot of sense, Naruto. Next along was a Kankinjo, a long golden rope that could draw out someone's soul with a command. Again, Naruto was confused by the phrase. There was no actual information on it. Seems like Kumo didn't want people to know how their tools really work. Naruto shook his head. Communication was the first step towards understanding. The item after that was a large crimson gourd that reminded Naruto of Gaara container on his back. But it didn't have a sand headband wrapped around the middle like Gaara's. It was a Benizaku to capture one's soul. In all, they seem like strange group of items. Seems like you will need all three of them to get the use out of them. But due to the bulky sword and the gourd, that seemed impractical. The fourth item was different from the rest. It was a staff with bird feathers at the end. The Bishaku. From the description, it allowed the user to generate all 5 chakra natures. That made no sense due to Rinnegan. Naruto was able to use 5 nature. Why would the sage need this? The more Naruto thought about it, the more he began to think that these tools were not actually for the sage, as he wondered if the sage made them as gift for someone. Finally, there was an item in the center room, as thick veil of glass was there, and ropes to keep no one from getting too near. It was a huge stone purified pot, with thick wrapping around the top, with the lightning conjure written on it. Naruto guessed that mark was only recently added. The pot was supposed to be able to seal anything inside, merging it with the liquid inside. In fact, it was used 3 different ways to capture the Haxabi before he was placed into another human sacrifice. The only thing that looked useful is a fan, but you can already use all 5 elements, Shizuku said as she looked towards a large stone pot. Actually, none of these are of any use to me. The 2 girls looked around, blinking in confusion. I don't understand. They were created by the Sage of 6th Path. They have to have some use. Naruto shook his head as he motioned his arms in a sweeping gesture. No, I mean all of these are fake. There is no chakra in them. Fu and Shizuku nodded in understanding. If there was anyone that can tell something belonged to the sage, it would be Naruto. I see, these must be replicas. The real ones are most likely protected somewhere better. Naruto nodded. He was thinking the same thing as Fu. There was no way Kumo would leave their treasure tools out like this, even with the security and barrier seals all over the glass. As they started to make their way out, soon they were outside sitting on a bench. So how are we supposed to learn anything about the sage if the items on display are all fakes? Said Shizuku. She saw Naruto and Fu smirk. As she groaned, she could already imagine what they were thinking. Can we please not make another enemy out of a hidden village? Naruto simply shrugged while Fu didn't seem to care. After all, she was already being hunted by one hidden village. You were too much, Shizuku, said Naruto. She looked at Naruto with a stern expression as he rolled back of his head. You're planning on stealing tools, aren't you? It wasn't really a question, so Naruto did not answer as he got off the bench and started to walk back to the temple. Fu quickly followed him while Shizuku looked at the two with her eye twitching. Naruto! He just kept walking, waving back to her. Naruto! She raced after him. Whatever he had planned would be a bad idea. Time skip. It was a bad idea. Thankfully, Naruto did not plan on attempting to steal a national treasure of Kumu, at least not yet. For one, they didn't know where the real ones were, and they did not know what kind of protection they might have. Of course, that made Naruto see it as a challenge, something that increased Shizuka fears. She knew when he had a goal, he would move heaven and earth to see it accomplished, and it would not be well for them if Kumu ever found out what they were planning. But right now everything was going back to normal as Naruto was still practicing his lightning manipulation as he got the second stage from Momoy. Shizuka was still refining her control over water, and Fu was, well, doing whatever Fu did. Honestly, she was a bit of a mystery. She would wander off into Kumu, only to come back around lunch, spar with Naruto, then wander off again. As Shizuka had no idea what she did. But it seems that Fu just likes her peace and quiet. It was probably her own way of proving her independence after having her entire life planned and controlled by Taki. Unfortunately right now, Fu seemed rather aimless. She lacked a goal. The only thing she did was follow Naruto, and she wanted to protect him. It was obvious though, she was looking for something, trying to find a purpose in her life. Shizuku's monologue was interrupted though, as Naruto came in with a smile as he picked her up. He swung her around in a hug, before placing her back down as he went to another room. She blushed deeply. She had to calm herself as she followed him. Naruto? As much as I enjoy the hug, can you tell me why? As Naruto looked around, she thought that he was going to pull her into another hug, as she didn't mind. I got it. I know how we can get the tools. She sighed. Really? How? She asked. I'm going to learn how to become invisible, he said. Skip. This is impossible, said Naruto, as he was in his training ground, his hands in a ram seal, as he was focused on drawing out and molding his chakra. Fu sat to one side as she was reading a scroll on the fundamentals of chakra. Fu was the type to study the basics when she was stuck on what to do, without any access to jutsu scrolls or taijutsu scrolls. And without Naruto sparring with her, she didn't have much to do. Then, are you going to look for another way? Asked Fu, as Naruto shot her a look. Of course not, I'm going to find a way to turn invisible, if it's the last thing I do. Fu just tilted her head. But didn't you just say it was impossible? Naruto sighed as he ran a hand through his hair. It's just the frustration talking. I knew it's possible. That old pervert back in Yunakuni, he could do it. That's part of where I got the idea from in the first place. Fu raised the eyebrow, but she didn't say anything else, as she returned back to her scroll. As Fu was taking up reading, she especially liked the romance novels, when the prince came and rescued the princess, and whisked her away to a new life. She didn't understand the romantic part though, some of the attraction. Why would people act nervous or scary on those things? Then again, she never really felt those emotions before, so she couldn't really relate that well. She had a lot of time to read lately, with Naruto taking upon himself to try and become invisible. It was something he had been trying for the past 2 weeks, and finding only partially success. It was sometimes amusing what he would try to come up with, the high division, as his idea became more and more ludicrous, and failing, even worse. As Naruto had tried Genjutsu, but he wasn't really fond of that ability, seeing that he never really practiced it before, and he didn't have the time. The next thing he tried was a hench. The moment he walked, he changed into whatever was behind him, but that he couldn't think fast enough to do that. The next thing he tried was a chameleon, summoning a chameleon. But they already existed. Their boss had died, and the person that last hold the contract seemed to die as well. So they did not have a summoning scroll at the moment, or well, they lost it. They had believed that they were never going to be summoned again. So they became quite accepting of Naruto, as he studied one of their kind for a while. A large chameleon that was about the size of a dog. Unfortunately, Lizard had no idea how their own invisibility worked. It was an instinct thing. Just like Naruto Rinnegan abilities. He just worked on instinct when things came to him like that. Even though they vanished though, they still had a weak sense. So if someone really tried hard, which Naruto knew the place was going to be well protected, they would be found out. As the chameleon he trained with told Naruto that he could just summon a larger one of them and hide inside of it. Naruto decided to save that for a last resort. Even though it turned out to be a dead end, Naruto made good friends with the chameleons, promising that if he ever found their leader, as most of them thought he was dead and most of them thought he was missing, he would send him back home. Next he turned to space-time ninjutsu, but that was quickly abandoned as well. The skill and time to go into creating something like that was just too much. He then came up with the idea of bending light around his body. But there were certain problems. He would be blind for the duration of the technique. Naturally, no light hitting his body meant also no light hitting his eyes, so he wouldn't be able to see. And 2 floating eyes, if you want to see, would be rather strange, and people would saw them, so yeah, that was bad. But he found out there was a few ways to bend light, as it was subjected to gravity, like many things on Earth. But the extra force he needed would be too much, So he put that in the plan B column to work on something about that later. He then switched over to his chakra as he tried to use his chakra to bend the lighter on his hands. Naruto was surprised when he saw his hand ripple a bit. He calmed himself from shouting out. He just needed a way to make this cover his entire body, but he would have to be adjusting it on the fly as he moved. So at the moment he was currently working on that, as his hands were rippling like water. One good thing about this, it didn't actually waste any chakra when he was finished. He could just absorb the chakra that was floating around his body back into him. It meant he could train literally as long as he was awake, which he has been doing for the past 5 days. He sighed as he lost control, most of his forearm become invisible. So far, only his fingertips could stay invisible. It was rather unnerving because it looked like they were chopped off. Right now he was trying to extend technique over his entire body, as opposed to one arm. And Naruto found out something: when using chakra on his body, it lacked any smell. So, he would be undetectable if he became invisible. Only sound or touch could give him away, and Naruto would already use chakra to muffle his movements, so yeah. Fu looked up as she saw him, cursing once again, as she sighed. She didn't know how he was doing that, as she didn't have that, will to push on so much, be dedicated to one thing. But it was that exactly what she wanted. But he looked like he needs some rest. Perhaps you should get some rest. Rest your mind and your body. Probably you will come with a new way, she said. I can't stop now. I know that I'm close to a breakthrough. He spoke with such passion it brought a smile to her face. As she tucked her scroll away, she made her way to offer him, as she placed a soft hand on his shoulder. If you remain stressed, you will only make yourself agitated. After training one's muscle, you must give them time to rest. The mind and chakra system are no different. Naruto was about to argue with her, but the way she spoke made him falter. She didn't speak with condescension like she knew what was best for him. She spoke to him as a friend like she wanted, the best for him. He sighed as he got up and stretched. There was a lot of clicks all over his joints. Maybe you're right, I think I'll go for a walk. Amoy told me there's some impressive sights around the village, and with all this training I never really got to see them. As he smiled at her, Fu felt that strange feeling in her stomach as she wondered if she was sick or something. She just nodded as she went back to the temple. The only reason why she was out here was to watch Naruto progress. Timescape. As Naruto made his way, it was a hollowed out volcano where Kumu held their tuning exams, as there was a stone garden near beside it. Massive large stones that rose up, surrounded by 4 mountains on each side. It was an impressive place as there was a massive long lake there, as Naruto walked on top of the surface, as he looked up at the towering pillars and spikes of stone. As he continued to wander and made his way, until he found himself near the center of the construct, as he saw a small temple right there. There was a stairs way leading up to it. Curious, Naruto climbed the stairs, as he felt the lingering chakra someone was training here. They were obviously powerful. They left such dense chakra hanging in the air for so long, as he stopped at the top, as he admired the simple building there. But as soon as his foot touched the last step, a man emerged from the building. Yo, he seen the mighty Killer Bee got someone up and visiting. Naruto raised the eyebrow at the eccentric man in front of him. He had the traditional dark skin that most Kumo ninjas possess, and also a rather large physique. He had sunglasses with an almost white outfit, as he had headguards and shins and gloves with dark blue pants, and the kanji for iron tattooed on his exposed shoulder. Hello, I didn't realize anyone was here, said Naruto. I thought the temple was empty. It was a small lie, but he didn't need this man knowing that he could sense lingering chakra in the air. As Naruto realized why, he was a Jinchuriki. Biju chakras radiating from the man with waves. He probably practiced it recently. Now you must be a real out-of-towner, because everyone knows that this is the mighty home of the Killer Bee. As the man talked, he moved his arms and head to a beat that it seems only he was hearing. It was rather amusing. Nice to meet you, Killer Bee. Bee placed a hand on Naruto's shoulders. Now, little monk, get out of that funk, because there's no need for the pleasantries between us Jinchuriki, you fool. Naruto grinned as he rolled back of his neck. Oh, it really that obvious, huh? Bee nodded with his own smirk. Oh yeah, Mighty Hatsubi-san was bringing some real drama when he felt the host of Mr. Knight entering our shrine. Naruto was surprised by that. The man could also detect and tell which Biju he had. He was just glad the Kyuubi presence seemed to overthrow Shikaku's. That would have just brought up some question that he wasn't ready to answer, as he wondered if the Kyuubi could sense him as well, so he can talk to the Hatsubi Naruto asked. Killer Bee nodded as Naruto followed him inside the temple as man symbol walked off, so Naruto followed behind him. Inside was rather large, entire room hollowed out of the mountain stone. There were lot of murals on the wall, some of the Hatsubi, and from what he can assume they're Nibi. Yeah, me and Hatsubi-sama has faced all kind of trauma. We're partners. You see me, we're the perfect Jinchuriki, fool. Naruto ignored the last part. as he wondered if he could attain that. So you and Haxby have a good relationship? Killer Bee nodded. At first, we were enemy, and we fought, but then we rap, and then we realized we didn't like to be trapped. So now we're friends, you see? He says he raised his hand. As Naruto simply nodded. The Kyuubi had told him many times that he hated being trapped inside of here. Well, inside of him. So we worked out a deal, and me and Haxby-sama, friendship went wee. Because we're the mighty 8 Tails and Killer Bee. You fool, you fool. So, Mr. 9, you're looking mighty fine. Why did you come to find Killer Bee when last I heard you were in the big tree? Naruto could only assume that he meant Konoha by that, with his strange way of talking. As he realized something, this must be the Bee Sensei Amoy talk about. Small world. Actually, I had no idea you were here. A friend told me this was a good spot to visit. I was frustrated about something, so I came out here to relax. Killer Bee nodded as the two sat down on the floor, both in cross-legged positions. Ain't no place fresher to clear your head and somewhere to get my rhymes right, you see? As Naruto looked around, the man was right. Since walking into this place, he felt refreshed, like his mind had been clear. Something was strange about this place. So, said Naruto, as he never expected to run into one of the Jinchurikis. How is it in Kumu? It was an innocent question, but B got what he was saying. As he was asking if he was mistreated. To come so far out of the village, that wasn't really a good sign. Well, ain't that cute little 9B worrying about the Killer Bee? Well, you don't have to be because no one will beat it on me. Naruto nodded a pleasant smile. At least it was good to meet one Jinchuriki who wasn't hated by his village. His previous thoughts about Kumu before coming here wasn't really good. Painted by Konoha, propaganda. They were the last wars, the Haiga incident, and a few others that put them in a bad eye to Konoha. But after living there, he realized it was just like anywhere else. People just trying to get by in life. I'm glad, said Naruto, as B nodded. You little monk, you looked a bit down. You say that it was a leaf that made you frown? Naruto leaned back on his hands. He hadn't had any contact with Konoha in over 5 years. As he realized it'd been that long since he ran away from his former home. No, I have a good life, strong bonds with my friends, and a stubborn, but knowledgeable fox in my gut. Anyway, I've mostly been on the road for the past year. Leaf hasn't had anything to do with my mood for a long time now. He chuckled at that, but he had to keep it vague, as Killer Bee did not hate his village, like Fu, as he had to remember that. While he did not agree with the balance of power thing that the individuals represented, he didn't really want to start a war between Konoha and Kumu. That's tight, you. A good friend on your back that can help take the flak. That's all you need. Naruto nodded as he stood up, Killer Bee doing it as well. I know this is asking a lot, but is there any way the Warakage won't find out about me being here? I don't want to cause a war or anything. Killer Bee simply stepped forward. Man, we cool. Anything else would just be cruel. Gotta stay tied to the fellow Jinchuriki, or my name ain't the mighty Killer Bee. You don't gotta worry about bro find out. It was like you were never here, without a doubt. As he zipped his mouth and held out his hand to give Naruto a fist bump. As Naruto simply smiled as he bumped fists with B. It was really good meeting you, Killer Bee. It's nice to see a Jinchuriki having a good life. Killer Bee simply nodded, sporting a similar smile as well. As the two stayed and talked a little while longer about Killer Bee's rapping most of the time. And Naruto even told him about Fu, as Killer Bee would like to meet another people from their group. As Naruto parted, as he promised to bring Fu around sometime, as he honestly thought she needed more people to talk to besides him and Shizuku. As Naruto left, and he had a small smile on his face, he wandered back to the temple as he felt lighter and calmer. It was a bit of rest that he exactly needed. In the next week, Naruto made extreme progress. He could cover his entire body in a thin layer of refining chakra. Now all he needed to do was reflect it perfectly. It felt liberating to complete his own technique, seeing that the sage already possessed the Rinnegan and had all of these abilities. And it felt more exciting when he knew that he was going to complete it, and he was going to push it to its absolute limit to become perfect. He had a lot of fun sneaked up on his companions, startling Fu and Shizuku, as he sparked something inside of her after one of his little pranks. So Fu made a vow to find a way to counteract his ability, as she had more fire in her eyes now lately, and a purpose in her step, as Naruto was glad. As he also kept his promise and brought Fu to Killer Bee. They weren't instant friends, but they had an understanding. He knew not to stroke too close to her past, as Bee understand that, and she never commented about the way he talked. Killer Bee offered them a few pointers on controlling their Bijuu chakra, but they declined. Naruto felt uncomfortable taking the Kyuubi chakra when he was finally starting to see some change in the fox. He wanted to build a better foundation relationship between them before he went after anything like that. Fu, on the other hand, already had experience with leading her own power. She just didn't want anything to do with it anymore. Taki had controlled her and the creature inside her for too long. She would become strong in her own power, not from born it from something else. Other than that, the week had went by quickly, and All of them seemed to be in high spirits, except for Shizuku, as Naruto felt like something was wrong, which is the reason why he was currently on top of the temple with her, looking up at the sky. They had both sat in stands for the 5 minutes, just looking up at the stars. How many do you think they are? Stars, I mean. As Naruto heard her tone, it was soft, and it sounded rather strange. She was not as happy as she pretended to appear. I don't know, he said, but I bet people are trying to count them. She nodded, her eyes still focused on the sky. I can't believe how beautiful it looks. Being up here, it wasn't raining, as she never had the time to look and just watch the sky. Do you think I'll always have this curse? As Naruto sighed, he realized why she was so unhappy now. Leaving Kumu meant returning back under the rain. She didn't want the sky to be taken away from her, nor that she had a taste. No, said Naruto. She looked towards him as she was surprised by the firmness in his tone. As he turned towards her with a small, confident smile. What makes you so certain, she said, as her voice was unsure. Naruto got up and moved closer to her and sat back down. Remember the promise I made to you, he said. I'd never go back on my promises. One day, you'll be able to look up at the sky and sun, to see whenever you want. Hell, if I have to, I'll take you to Katsunokuni. Even if it rains, you'll just be doing the residents a favor. The both of them chuckled at that. Thanks, Naruto. It's no problem, he said. You're my friend. She grabbed his head as she held on to his face, looking at him. No, really. Without you, I would probably still be in that bandit camp, or sold off to some slavers. Or worse, she said. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder. But you saved me, and showed me things I never believe I'll get to see. As she looked towards the sky, case in point. They both shook again as she brought his head down to face her. So thank you, she said. With that, she leaned forward and kissed him right on the lips. When they parted, both of their faces was red, and Shizuku was smiling slightly. Naruto was a bit dazed by the contact. She giggled as she climbed down. As Naruto spent another 10 minutes on the roof, just thinking about things, as he with a smile right on his lips. Timescape. It was a rather quiet, dark room. In the back of the temple, 2 Rinnegan eyes just opened up. Just appeared out of nowhere. The ear was rippling slightly, as you could see teeth, as the person was smiling. Through his clone's eyes, Naruto observed the ear where he knew his actual body was. His chakra signature was completely gone. In fact, even his Rinnegan, he was sure that he would never spot himself, unless he knew where to look. At least he hoped that was the case, as he planned on taking the artifacts tonight. If everything went to plan, he would sneak into Raikag's office, a dangerous plan itself. Find out where the sage's artifacts were, and leave Kumu with them. Hopefully he could do all of that without being detected. Fu and Shizuku and a clone of Naruto had left earlier today. That was enough to fool the guards. They wouldn't be focused on those that were already leaving. They would be focused on who tried to break into their village, as they didn't know that Naruto was here. They weren't that happy with leaving Naruto behind, especially Shizuku, but they didn't know how to perform the invisibility technique. But he promised him, he assured him that he would be fine. She had been worried for him, Shizuku especially, as her gaze was flicking towards him as they left. It was a week since the kiss up on the roof. Things had become different between them. They started to read into things that was normal at first, like passing by each other and, well, holding onto each other's shoulder for too long. And Naruto started to overthink things a lot. Even so, he cleared his mind of all distractions. Tonight, he would need that for his technique. As his camouflage technique was dependent on his emotions, as they tied in with how his emotions went out. Any slight disturbance, anger, rage, could flare his chakra and give him away. Naruto has been practicing his ability to remain silent as well, and as a monk, he was rather good at it. His main concern would be Shakijo, that despite full protest and concern, he had taken with him. Seeing that the jinglings were really bad, but Naruto could use it, and he had a plan in mind just in case. And Fu couldn't really carry it out of the village to the rendezvous point, as it would drain her chakra before she reached there. And Naruto did not tell her that his clones also shared the ability to use Prida Path. So if she knew that, she would have forced him to give it to the clone. But he had something in mind. As Naruto stepped out of the temple, as he had on a cloak over his usual clothes, with a hood pulled over his face just in case, with a mask over the lower half of his face. As he activated his jutsu, his trip through the village was rather uneventful. He had tested his jutsu a few times on Fu and Shizuku, but Jonin's on the other hand. He stuck to the streets in case, seeing that there was always ninjas hopping from rooftop to rooftop at night. Kumu had a curfew at night. Only shinobis were allowed out at this time. It took around 10 minutes for him to make his way towards the Raikage's tower. The climb up the winding stair was even worse, as the stairs were wide enough for 2 people, but barely. If someone came down, he had to press himself up against a wall and hope that they didn't brush against him. As he made his way to the last step, as he released a soft sigh, before ducking into the building. That was the easy part. Now he had to infiltrate the Kage's office undetected. He had to go around a few shinobis and office workers on their late shift. As he finally reached the door to the Raikage's office, the golden door. As Naruto saw a woman outside, she had her desk aside, with a large stack of paper, her head lying down as well. As he saw a small name card on the desk. Mabi. Seems like she was working late and fell asleep. As Naruto softly slipped inside the office, closing the door without a click. Naruto nearly cried out in surprise as he held his breath. The Raikage was sitting right there. As he hadn't been noticed. Looking around, there was no Anbu. He found that strange. Even though it was the Kage, the strongest man in the village, he thought the man would want some protection. Was his ego that large? As Naruto scurried around the room making no sound, the Raikage didn't seem to notice anything. As Naruto didn't go into his bag, he knew the speed of the 4th Raikage, he was currently the fastest man in the world right now, seeing that the 4th Raikage was dead. He was supposed to be incredibly in taijutsu, and his lightning cloak was supposed to make him invulnerable, even from most wind attacks, despite it being stronger. As Naruto knew, despite of his Rinnegan, this man in front of him was a beast and could crush him, so that is why he needed the element of surprise. Slowly, Naruto went behind the Raikage and raised his Shakijo in front of him, creeping up to the man's neck. As Naruto tapped his neck, the Raikage eyes sprang in alarm, but his eyes rolled back as his head slopped down his desk. To all the world, it looked like he simply fell asleep. Tomorrow, he will have a nasty headache, but nothing more. Naruto released a small sigh that was a rather stressful event that he rather not want to complete. As Naruto moved to the back of the room where the file cabinets were, as he absorbed the seals, as he went through the S cabinet, as he flipped through the files, finally finding the one marked Sage, as he scanned it quickly, as he frowned, as he slipped it back, as he closed the cabinet softly, as he looked to see 2 of the windows were smashed in from the inside. He heard rumors of the Raikage way of leaving rooms, but he hadn't seen it until now. As Naruto jumped through the window and make his way down the peak. Another stealthy walk through the village, Naruto found himself at the museum that was locked. The real artifacts were underground, but it said that most of them were lost to the gold and silver brothers. He didn't know where those 2 were, and he didn't have the time. As he slipped into the museum, he had to pull back as he saw she and another Kumu Shinobi that he didn't realize. She, partner, looked like an older Amoy, but he looked much more deadlier, with a large sword as well, but he had a rather bored exterior. Naruto flattened himself against the museum wall as the 2 walked out. They were on a routine check. She didn't stop as he glanced. His eyes roamed over where Naruto was, as Naruto took a breath, but he did not move a single muscle. What is it, she? As his teammates saw nothing but the wall. It's nothing, Darui. Thought I sensed something for a moment. Probably a rat or nothing. Darui walked off as she glanced back. He swore he sensed something a moment ago. It was small and flicker, but the fact that it vanished so quickly, that concerned him. Inside the museum, as Naruto had moved, as he panted, holding his breath, after just staying there, as he was now releasing it. The moment she had turned to talk to Darui, he had moved. Well, he was glad that his technique could stand up to a sensor type shinobi, or he would be done for. He didn't want to go to something so nerve-wracking once again. He had no intention of fighting his way out of Kumu without some serious heavy damage. Probably he would even make it out of the Raikage and everyone ganged up on him. He disabled the seals that he came across. That was like a trail leading right towards him, but it's not like he was going to stay here for too long. The only thing that was really down here was a large pot. The others are taken by the gold and silver brothers, as that was a part of his legacy anyway, seeing that it was belonged to the sage. The only thing Kumu ever used it for was to seal away the 8 tails. Killer Bee was stable at the moment, minus his strange fixation with rapping all the time. But if Naruto wanted to understand more about his ancestor, with the Kyuubi being so unwilling to talk about the man most time, he needed to study the things that the man created. As he came to a stop to see 2 standing shinobi in front of a vault-like door, he quickly approached him, and soon they were on the floor. He really loved his Shakijo. It took him little time to break through the seals, as the door slid open like it was covered in grease. As Naruto's eyes widened, the room was filled with shelves upon shelves of ancient artifacts from the 3rd Great Shinobi War, stretching back way towards the Warring Clan period. Truly an impressive sight. As Naruto looked up, the pot was on a rather sturdy shelf. Given its weight, the sage of a 6-pack really lugged that thing around Naruto wondered. Seemed rather impractical. As he lifted the pot, the thing came up to his waist. He carefully set it back down as he realized something. Would his technique envelop the pot completely? A giant floating pot through the village wasn't really discreet. He looked at a large lightning conjure in the pot first. That was added later. There was a few seals on it though. They could probably track it. After the other secrets had been stolen, they didn't want this one to be taken as well, without a tracking seal. As Naruto stripped away the chakra as a seal, dried up and float off. As Naruto groaned as he put the thing on his back. Lucky for him though, his technique was able to cover him in the pot, but he was stressing his control now. After another quick trip, Naruto found himself outside, the cold mountain air bursting against his skin. As he set off in the village, as he felt like a snail, as he passed a few shinobis, but he did his best to get by them. But he failed to notice as he passed one kunoichi. She sniffed the air as her ear twitched, as she looked rather confused. Timescape. As Naruto panted, as he was a mile away from the rendezvous point that he was going to meet up with Fu in. As he straightened up, fixed out his spine with a few cracks after that pot had been on his back, as he dropped the invisible technique by now. But its instant kicked in as 3 kunais were thrown towards him, but they were blocked. He was surprised he did not sense anyone till now. Nonetheless, a woman dropped down, her long, blonde hair tied up in a ponytail as she fell. Well, that was an impressive technique, especially for a monk. Naruto recognized her as a playful kunoichi he met the first day in Kumu, Yujito. If you remember her name right. Naruto placed a pot on the ground with a small thud. It was like she could just pick up the pot and go. It was too heavy and chakra draining. Even so, it was the same to him. He knew that it was, one way or another, suppress her or abandon the pot. Trade secret, I'm afraid, said Naruto. As Yujito had followed her instinct on a hunch, as she had heard soft footsteps and she did not see anyone walking. There was also a scent, but it was like someone was suppressing a scent, which was rather strange. I guess I'll have some fun, working answers of you. She licked her lips a seductive way, trying to throw him off a bit, but he was completely serious. As Naruto gathered his chakra around him, you can try. On the inside, she really wished that she had brought some backup with her. She was always too brash, just like the Naruto-sensei always told her. As the boy had been running that pot for a while now, and now he looked perfectly fine. That was strange. Oh, I intend to let the monk. As she flared her chakras, her nails grew long. As she dropped in her stance, as Naruto dropped in his, Mizunomai, he said, as she realized the style was similar to the Hyuga clan in Konoha. But this boy did not look like one, although she couldn't see his eyes. As she lashed out with her claws in a straight motion that was supposed to leave him impaled on her claws. She would like to play around a bit, but stealing precious artifacts from Kumu was a dangerous offense. But Naruto slipped in her guard and knocked her hand up gently and flipped her back. When she spun, she saw him raise an eyebrow. You're a Jinjulki, aren't you? For the Nibi, right? She faltered just for a moment. She shook her head. Her status wasn't really a secret, and if this boy could find out where the pot was, well, he could get that information. As she launched another attack towards him, as she came for the barrage of slashes towards him. But to her surprise, she couldn't even touch him, not even once, as he flew like water on her attacks. But he was only attacking her wrist to knock away her attacks from him. She jumped back as she felt oddly tired as she flashed through hand signs as she finished on Tiger Seal. She took in a deep breath and released a large stream of fire, blue flames, that took on the shape of a large spear as it came raining down on the young monk. But she watched as the boy didn't even dodge, as he was engulfed by the technique. She shook her head. It wasn't the fastest technique, even if it was supercharged by Nibi. She had planned on him dodging so she could catch him in the ear where he couldn't dodge. Almighty push! In her shock, she let her guard down slightly. Well, all of her guard was up. She couldn't stop this attack as her body was smashed by invisible force. She saw the flame absorb into his outstretched palm while the other was stretched out to her. She twisted mid-air and landed on all fours like a cat. She rushed forward as she focused, not doing the fire techniques anymore. See that was not really effective at all. As she flashed those seals quickly, she held out both of her hands as lightning exploded out of them like a laser, directly towards Naruto. As the place got bright by the two bolts shooting towards him, Naruto stood there, not even dodging. This time she could see clearly, as the technique was absorbed the moment it reached close to his body. Wow, that's impressive. Our own ninjutsu is just as effective on you, like that. Naruto raised his hand as he didn't call out the name of technique. She was ready for the force wall to slam into her, but she was surprised when she was yanked towards him. She tried to twist her body and claws, but Naruto was ready for that, twisting his body at the last moment as she slammed into a wall. But she wasn't a Jinjulki for nothing as she quickly jumped to her feet as she scanned the area. But he didn't even move, he was just standing there. Strangely enough, he didn't look tired at all. If anything, he looked more refreshed. She couldn't say the same for herself. Usually, she would have energy to spare in fights, but the most he touched her, the more of her energy just gets sapped away. But that didn't say that she was out. But if he could absorb her ninjutsu and she couldn't really get close, how could she fight him? Kid, you're pretty good, I'll give you that. Unfortunately, I have some things to do, so I have to wrap this up right now. As she felt humiliated that she had to use her trump card against a kid that doesn't even look like he's hit his teens yet. Unfortunately, in Shinobu World, you have to acknowledge that it was opponents that were both younger and stronger than you. As she dropped to all fours, chakra radiating out of her body. The pressure snapped the bandage holding her ponytails together as her hair started to flare wildly around her. Naruto was a bit worried now, not because of her, but the more chakra she used, the more noticeable they will get. You didn't have to need to be a sensor to feel this amount of chakra from here. As Naruto watched her erupt into a large spear of blue flames, and there standing in front of him was a Nibe, one green eye and one yellow. It fired a massive fireball towards him. Naruto stood there and took it as chakra, no matter where it came from or how dense it was still chakra. Then again, he wouldn't want to test that against a Biju bomb, from what he heard from Fu. The Nibe roared dangerously towards him, ready to crush and stomp on him. But Naruto opened his eyes fully. He was going to throw this thing back to Kumu if he have to. But the Nibe stopped, seeing his eyes. It focused on his eyes keenly, before the flames started to recede. All that remained was Yujito panting in the crater. She looked up at Naruto as she looked scared as Naruto walked towards her before she fell unconscious of the state of using Biju's chakra, not to mention with Naruto absorbing her chakra earlier. Naruto was about to grab the pot and get out of there, but he looked back at Yujito. He estimated Kumo Shino will reach his position in 40 minutes. As he nodded to himself, that was enough time to do what he planned to do. But guys, we'll be ending this episode right here. If you want the next part, be certain to do like, subscribe, comment down below, and turn on that bell notification to stay posted. Remember to share to all of your friends on your social media platform, and stay in tune for the brand new episode of What If Naruto Was Given Abilities by 4 Devils, guys. That'll be posted on his channel later on. And also, stay in tune for What If Naruto Awakening the Yellow Rinnegan after his exile over an Anime King 3. Link will be at the top of the description, so stay tuned and enjoy. But for now, I'm out of here. See you guys soon. Peace. What over Anime King 3. Bye guys.